The night my husband told me to leave, I didn't realize it was the beginning of my freedom. I remember the way his words floated in the air, calm, almost rehearsed, while the rest of the room seemed to fall silent. The microwave hummed behind him, counting down the last seconds on a bowl of leftovers, and for a moment I honestly thought he was joking. People don't just tell their wives to get out, not after 12 years of marriage. Not on a Thursday night when the laundry is still warm in the basket and the house smells faintly of lemon cleaner. But Marcus didn't blink. He didn't laugh. He didn't even look at me. He simply said it again, as if adjusting the volume on a radio. "Clara, you need to leave." I didn't cry. Not then. I just stood there gripping the back of the dining chair, feeling the wooden spindles press into my palm. It wasn't the kind of moment that makes you fall to your knees. It was the kind that makes your mind go strangely quiet, like a door closing in a long hallway. If you had asked me that morning how my marriage was doing, I would have said steady. Not thrilling, not miserable, just steady, like a ceiling fan that wobbles a little but keeps turning. I didn't know the wobble was about to snap the whole thing loose. Before all this, life looked simple. Or maybe I only told myself it was. Most mornings started with the same soft ritual, me waking before Marcus, easing out of bed so the frame wouldn't creak, then tiptoeing to the kitchen in my slippers. I'd start the coffee machine, listening to its comforting drip, while the early gray light slipped through the blinds and painted lines across the counter. Those quiet minutes, before the day woke up and demanded things, felt like tiny prayers. No words, no requests, just breathing. Marcus rarely joined me for coffee. He was a night owl, always claiming he needed just 10 more minutes of sleep, which usually turned into 30. I didn't mind. I'd gotten used to the solitude. Some women resent the quiet. I learned to live inside it. Our house sat on a bend in a quiet cul-de-sac, a beige 2-story with blue shutters that needed repainting. I always meant to fix them, but Marcus insisted they were fine for now. That was his answer for everything. Fine for now. Our marriage, I guess, fell into that category too. I spent my days working at a small accounting office downtown. Not glamorous, but steady. Ms. Patel, my supervisor, trusted me with the complicated files because I didn't mind sorting through chaos. Numbers always make sense eventually. People, not so much. Marcus worked from home, something about digital marketing and client acquisition. His words, not mine. It mostly meant long hours at his computer, phone pressed to his ear, pacing the hallway with the same script. "Let's circle back. That's a great opportunity. We can definitely scale that." When he talked like that, he sounded like a man who owned a suit he never wore. We weren't unhappy. We weren't passionate. We were something in between. A marriage in neutral. But there were pockets of tenderness, little gestures that made me believe everything was okay. The way he would warm my car on cold mornings. The nights he would place a blanket over me if I fell asleep on the couch. The rare, lazy Sundays when he'd rest his head in my lap and ask me to play with his hair. Those moments were thin as thread, but I held on to them like rope. Looking back now, I realize I had been living in fragments. I didn't see the full picture until it was too late. The first shift between us came quietly. It always does. I noticed it on a Wednesday, 3 weeks before that night. I came home from work to find Marcus in the kitchen, back straight, shoulders tense, as if someone had caught him doing something he shouldn't. His phone was face down on the counter, a detail that pricked me like a thorn. Marcus never put his phone face down. When he heard me come in, he cleared his throat and forced a smile that never reached. His eyes. "Hey," he said, voice too bright. "Hey," I echoed, waiting for him to relax. He didn't. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting my purse on the hook by the door. "Nothing." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Just work stuff. Work stuff." Another Marcus phrase that meant, "Don't ask." I didn't press him. I had grown so used to giving him space that I sometimes forgot I was his wife, not a polite guest. Dinner that night was quieter than usual. The clink of forks, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional sigh from Marcus. I watched him push his food around, taking tiny bites like a man with no appetite. "You okay?" I tried again. He nodded. Long day. But his eyes were elsewhere, somewhere behind me, or beyond the walls, or maybe inside himself. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to reach across the table and take his hand, remind him we were in this life together. But fear held me back. Not fear of him, but fear of hearing an answer I wasn't ready for. So I stayed silent, and in that silence something subtle but sharp shifted between us, like a fault line forming beneath our feet. Over the next week, the changes multiplied. He stopped joining me on the couch at night. Instead, he'd retreat to his office, door closed, typing furiously until long after midnight. He started wearing cologne to his remote meetings, not the light citrus one I bought him last Christmas, but a heavier, musky scent I didn't recognize. He kept his phone on silent, turned face down, sometimes even flipped upside down. And when he kissed me goodnight, it was quick, too quick, like a habit he was trying to break gently. I told myself not to overthink things. People go through phases, stress piles up. Maybe he was struggling with something he didn't know how to share. But late at night, lying in the dark with the moonlight stretching across our ceiling, I felt the shift like a cold draft in a closed room. Something was wrong, and some part of him, some deep, pulsing part, was already leaving me. That was the beginning, the unraveling, the slow, quiet descent that would lead to him standing in the kitchen weeks later, looking at me like a stranger and saying the words that cracked my life in half. "Clara, you need to leave. But before we get there, you need to know how the ground beneath me softened little by little, until one day it simply gave way." The first real clue didn't come loudly. It didn't come in a dramatic phone call or a lipstick stain on a shirt or even a whispered conversation behind a door. It came in the form of a missing sweater. A small thing, I know. But sometimes the truth announces itself in whispers before it ever dares to shout. I had been looking for my gray cable-knit cardigan, the soft one with the loose sleeves Marcus always said made me look cozy. I kept it folded on the top shelf of the closet, always in the same place, because I'm a creature of habit. That Saturday morning, though, the shelf was empty. I searched everywhere. Laundry basket, hallway chair, even the trunk of my car in case I'd tossed it there absent-mindedly. Nothing. I stood in the closet doorway, arms crossed against the early chill, staring at that empty spot for a long time. Marcus walked by on his way to the bathroom, toothbrush sticking out of his mouth. "You seen my gray cardigan?" I asked casually. He paused, just a beat too long before answering. "Nope." That pause. I felt it in my stomach. He was a terrible liar, and after 12 years I could read the tiniest shifts in his tone. But I let it go. I told myself I was imagining things. People misplace stuff all the time. Still, the moment stayed with me, like a pebble in my shoe. Later that afternoon, I found myself folding laundry in the living room. The dryer hummed behind me, the sun warmed the carpet, the house felt still and peaceful, too peaceful. Marcus was in his office, door shut, the same muffled, "Right, let me check that for you," drifting through the hallway. I thought I heard a woman's voice on the other end of the call. Not loud, not clear. Just a light, lilting sound followed by Marcus speaking lower, more softly. Not business soft, intimate soft. The kind of voice people use when they don't want to be overheard. I stopped folding. A towel hung loose from my hands. I stepped toward the door, just 2 quiet steps, enough to confirm what I thought I heard. But before I could lean closer, the door opened. Marcus stepped out so suddenly I jerked back. He looked startled, really startled, as if he'd caught me doing something wrong instead of the other way around. "Hey," he said sharply, too sharply. "What are you doing?" I lifted the towel, laundry. He glanced at the phone in his hand, then at me. "I'm on a call." I could hear, I said gently. He swallowed, jaw tight. A client. I nodded, not wanting to push. Okay. He stood there a moment longer, as if waiting for me to accuse him of something. When I didn't, he simply walked back inside his office and closed the door. Not softly this time, but with a hollow thud. The towel felt heavy in my hands. That night, after dinner, I tried to bridge the growing gap between us. We were sitting at the table, the remains of roasted chicken and potatoes between us. Marcus was scrolling on his phone, thumb tapping too quickly, face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. "Marcus," I said softly. He didn't look up. I wiped my hands on a napkin. I've been feeling like something's off with us. He froze, thumb mid-scroll, then set the phone face down. "What do you mean?" he asked, but his voice had that defensive edge I dreaded. "I don't know," I admitted. "You've seemed distant. You're working late, closing your door more, and earlier it sounded like you were talking to a client," he cut in. I nodded, even though it didn't feel true. "Okay, I just want to make sure we're okay." He sighed, a long, exasperated sound. "Clara, you always do this." My heart dropped. Do what? Overthink. Read into things. Turn nothing into something. I looked down at my plate at the smear of gravy the light reflected off of. "I'm not trying to start anything." "Well, you are," he said sharply. "I'm stressed. Work is insane right now. I don't need you policing my tone every time I speak." Policing. The word stung. "I'm trying to understand you," I whispered. "Well, maybe try trusting me instead," he snapped. The room went silent. Even the refrigerator seemed to quiet itself. He didn't apologize. He didn't take it back. He just grabbed his plate, walked to the sink, and rinsed it without another word. And I sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me, feeling like someone had turned off the lights in the middle of our conversation. The next week brought a slow drip of small oddities, little things that, on their own, meant nothing, but together created an unsteady rhythm. He changed his phone password. He showered twice a day, sometimes late at night. He wore a new shirt I didn't recognize. When I asked where it came from, he said, "I don't know, my closet." He started taking long drives alone to clear his head, but he always returned calmer, strangely content, as if something on those drives soothed him in ways home no longer could. I tried to tell myself that marriages go through rough patches, that people get overwhelmed, that maybe it was all in my imagination. But intuition is a quiet creature. It taps gently at first, then harder and harder, until the knocking becomes impossible to ignore. One evening, Marcus left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he went to grab a package from the porch. I wasn't snooping. Truly, I wasn't. But when I picked up my glass of water, my eyes flicked across the screen. An email tab was open. I saw only 3 words before he walked back inside, but those 3 words lodged themselves deep inside me. "I miss you." My breath caught, not because of the words, but because they were followed by a little red heart emoji, and a name I didn't recognize. A woman's name. Marcus entered the kitchen, and I dropped my gaze instantly, heart racing. "Everything okay?" he asked, sounding almost normal. "Yeah," I said quickly, "just thirsty." I set the glass down, fingers trembling slightly, and walked away before he noticed the color draining from my face. Something was happening, something real. And whatever it was, I was no longer imagining it. I didn't confront him that night, or the next. Instead, I moved around the house like someone storing little pieces of a puzzle they were too scared to put together. Every strange tone, every late-night shower, every sudden defensiveness. I tucked it all away. And all the while, that breadcrumb trail kept growing, leading me closer and closer to a truth I wasn't ready to face. But the discovery, when it finally came, was nothing like the hints that led up to it. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't quiet, It hit like a door slamming open in the middle of the night. And once I saw the full picture, I could never unsee it. It was a Friday, and the house felt smaller than usual. The light coming through the blinds was gray and hesitant, like it wasn't sure it wanted to be there. I had finished work early, a rare gift from my boss, and decided to surprise Marcus with dinner. Not because I expected anything from him, but because I needed a fragment of normalcy before the storm hit. I walked into the kitchen, humming softly, only to find the living room couch empty. His office door was closed. The faint click of his computer keys punctuated the silence. Something in the rhythm of those clicks felt deliberate, careful, as if he were trying to hide more than work. I paused, fingertips brushing the doorframe. And then I heard it, a voice, female, low, laughing quietly, the kind of laugh that slips out when someone thinks no one is listening. I froze. My pulse kicked up, hammering in my chest like a drum that refused to stop. I wasn't breathing. I couldn't. I just stood there, listening. "Marcus, come on," the voice said. "Don't make me wait." His reply was clipped, gentle, but intimate. "Just a second, I don't remember what happened in those seconds. I only remember the cold spreading through me, crawling down my arms and into my chest. The air had vanished. My knees shook. I gripped the doorframe so tightly my fingers ached. I don't think I fully realized it until the door opened. Marcus looked up, eyes wide, caught. And for a moment, just a moment, he seemed almost human again, almost like the man I married. Then recognition dawned, and his face hardened. "Clara," he said, voice low, sharp. "What are you doing here?" I stepped back, heart racing so fast I thought it might burst. I was going to surprise you with dinner," I said. My voice felt like someone else's. Distant, fragile. He straightened, suddenly stiff. "I'm busy. Just go. I should have left. I know that now. I should." Turned around, walked out, and kept the fragment of dignity I had left. But something inside me, anger, fear, grief, maybe all three, kept me rooted to the spot. I saw her then. The woman, sitting in our living room, legs tucked under her, smiling at Marcus like she had a right to be there. The same smile he used to give me, the smile that made my knees weak 12 years ago. Only now, it wasn't mine. My stomach twisted. The gray sweater I had been searching for weeks, the one that vanished without a trace, was draped over the armrest beside her. What is this?" I managed to say, voice breaking. She looked up at me, surprise flickering across her face. Not fear, not guilt, surprise. "Clara," Marcus said, sharply this time, but I didn't wait. I couldn't. My hand shot toward the sweater, snatching it off the chair. It smelled faintly of her perfume, and suddenly I understood. Every little change, every strange phone call, every late-night shower, it all led here. I dropped the sweater on the floor. It slid across the hardwood with a soft thud. "Why?" I whispered. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "It's not what you think." I laughed. Not out of humor, but something bitter, hollow. "Not what I think?" "Marcus, I've been following breadcrumbs for weeks. The emails, the calls, I stopped myself. I couldn't speak the next words without my voice trembling. The lies. The woman in our living room, the intruder in my life, finally stood. She tried to speak, but I wasn't listening. I couldn't listen. My chest hurt so badly I thought it might crack. My hands shook. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Marcus finally said it, the words that sealed everything. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. I love her. Love." He used that word like a dagger, like a casual shrug, like it didn't erase 12 years of shared mornings, quiet laughter, burnt toast, and laundry folded on Sunday afternoons. The room spun. My hands dropped to my sides, trembling. My legs felt like they weren't mine, and then, for the first time, I felt it. The raw, searing reality of betrayal. He had chosen someone else, right there, in our house, with our life built together like fragile clay. And I was nothing. I don't remember how I left. I don't remember grabbing my coat or locking the door behind me. I only remember the cold, the freezing wind cutting through my thin jacket, slicing at me like reality itself had sharpened. I walked the streets blindly. Each step echoed like a drum in an empty hallway. People passed by, blurred shapes of warmth I couldn't reach. My hands stuffed in my pockets, knees trembling, teeth chattering. And then I saw it. A black SUV pulled up beside me. The engine idled quietly. The tinted windows reflected the gray sky and my own broken reflection. The door opened, and a man stepped out. Not familiar, not threatening, but something about him felt safe. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, voice calm, not intrusive. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to collapse on the sidewalk and scream until someone, anyone, rescued me from the betrayal. But I only nodded. Not because I was okay, but because I couldn't trust my voice. He offered his arm. I hesitated. Then, almost without thinking, I took it. And for the first time in hours, maybe days, I felt a flicker of warmth. The SUV drove slowly, quietly, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. I watched the shadows pass, the houses blur, and somewhere deep inside me, I realized something profound. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else, something I didn't yet understand, but that I would. Because betrayal leaves scars, but it also teaches lessons, and it was time I learned mine. That night, in the safety of a stranger's kindness, I cried. Not just for Marcus, not just for the woman, but for myself, for the life I thought I had, for the trust I had given so freely and the betrayal that took it. I learned then that people can be cruel in ways that are quiet, slow, and meticulous. But I also learned that the human heart, my heart, is capable of more resilience than I ever imagined. And as the SUV carried me away from the life I thought I knew, I felt the first real stirrings of clarity. I would not stay broken. I would not vanish into grief. I would find my way forward. The next morning, I woke up in a small rented room that smelled faintly of lavender and old books. The sun poured through the thin curtains in soft, forgiving streaks. For the first time in what felt like weeks, I could breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. But clarity doesn't come gently. It comes with sharp edges, questions, and decisions you can't ignore. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tightly in my lap, thinking, what now? I could go back to the house. Pretend everything was fine. Pretend Marcus had never chosen someone else over me. Pretend my 12 years of marriage weren't just stepping stones for his deceit. Or I could act. I chose action. The first step was gathering information. I needed to know the full extent of what I was dealing with. I didn't want to be reactive, screaming at shadows. I wanted clarity. I started with small things, mutual friends, social media, subtle questions. "Hey, have you seen Marcus lately?" I asked a neighbor while watering the plants on my temporary balcony. "Oh, yes," she said, sipping her morning coffee. "He's been busy. You know how it is, always running around, big meetings, dinners, sometimes with company." I nodded politely, but my mind cataloged everything. With company, she had said. Not casual friends, not work colleagues, company. Every answer, every observation was a piece of the puzzle, and the more I listened, the more the picture became clear. Marcus wasn't just having an affair. He'd already woven this woman into our life, quietly, meticulously, as if he wanted to erase me without the inconvenience of confrontation. The next day, I returned to the house. I had a plan, not confrontation, not screaming, but methodical, deliberate steps to protect myself and reclaim what was mine, the locks. Changing the locks was symbolic and practical. No one could enter without my permission now. I collected my spare key, my will, my courage, and walked into the house like a storm that hadn't yet rained. Marcus was there, pacing in the kitchen. His eyes widened when he saw me, the same surprise I had seen weeks before. "I changed the locks," I said simply. Not a question, A statement. "You, what?" he stammered. "I changed the locks," I repeated, voice calm, almost clinical. "You're not living here anymore, you've made that choice." His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words could escape. I stepped closer, carefully, deliberately. "I'm not asking. I'm not pleading. I'm not negotiating. I'm reclaiming my life. You've had your chance to fix this, and you chose differently." The woman, his accomplice, our intruder, appeared behind him, pale and confused. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't counted on me acting with dignity and precision. We, Marcus tried, but his words were hollow. I raised my hand slightly, not to hit, but to assert presence. "Don't, just leave." And they did. I watched them go, the sound of their car fading into the distance, leaving silence that was finally mine. That night, I sat in the empty living room. The house that had once been our sanctuary now felt strange, alien. But it was mine. And that realization, simple, profound, was grounding. I thought about my next steps. Legal matters, financial security, emotional recovery. But first, I needed peace. Not denial, not distraction, not pretending. Peace. I started small. I lit a candle in the kitchen, the soft orange flame flickering over the countertops. I brewed coffee, inhaled the scent of it slowly, deliberately. I walked through the house, opening curtains, letting sunlight illuminate every corner, every shadow. The house didn't feel empty. It felt honest, clean, available. And for the first time, I felt power, not over Marcus, not over the woman, but over myself. I began documenting everything. Receipts, messages, emails, strange patterns I had noticed. I didn't know yet if I'd need it for court, for confrontation, or just to remind myself that I wasn't imagining things. But I kept meticulous records. Then, I made phone calls. I called my boss, explained I needed a short leave to handle personal matters, which was true, but only partially. I needed breathing room. I called my sister, who arrived within hours, carrying sandwiches and hugs. She didn't ask why, she didn't probe. She simply let me sit in her car while the world carried on outside, and we ate quietly, the soft hum of the engine a comforting drumbeat. And I began to plan. Marcus tried to call the next morning. "Clara, we need to talk," he said, voice like syrup, sticky and slow. "I don't think so," I said, sipping my tea. "There's nothing left to discuss. You can't just throw me out." I smiled faintly, not cruelly, but firmly. "I can, I did, and I will again if necessary." He sputtered, silence, frustration, the arrogance of someone who's never faced the consequences of their actions. I hung up. That afternoon I contacted a lawyer, not angrily, not frantically, calmly, practically. I explained the situation, laid out the facts. I didn't need revenge. I needed protection, justice, a clean break that left me intact, and with each step the knot in my chest loosened, not completely, not yet, but enough to breathe. That evening I stood by the window in our living room, looking out over the cul-de-sac. The same quiet street I had walked down in shock weeks ago now looked different. Smaller, manageable, familiar. I realized something I hadn't admitted before. The betrayal wasn't just Marcus or the other woman. It was my own complacency, my willingness to live in the cracks of our marriage without asking for more. And now, with him gone, I could fill those cracks myself. I lit another candle, soft amber light spilling across the floorboards. I poured a glass of water, then one for myself, sat down, and let the silence settle around me like a blanket. I had lost a husband, yes. I had lost a dream of a life I thought I had, but I hadn't lost me. Not yet. And that mattered more than anything. It started with whispers. Not loud ones, not the kind that come in gossip columns or social media posts, just quiet murmurs, drifting through phone calls, through neighborhood chats, through mutual friends who suddenly seemed nervous around Marcus. I hadn't planned it that way. I didn't need to announce his wrongdoing. But sometimes, truth has a way of slipping through cracks, even when you don't push it. One evening I ran into Mrs. Holloway, my neighbor, in the supermarket aisle. She stopped abruptly, eyes flicking from the groceries in my cart to my face, then back again. "Clara, she began, hesitating. I gave her a small smile. "It's okay, Mrs. H, you can speak freely." She blinked, lips pressed together, and finally whispered, "People are talking about Marcus, about the woman." I nodded, letting her words settle. "I know," I said softly. She exhaled. "I didn't want to believe it, but, well, you handled it better than most would." And that was the moment I realized something. The truth doesn't always need to be shouted. Sometimes it travels quietly, in the way a fallen leaf rolls down the street until it reaches the right doorstep. It wasn't long before our social circle, friends who had dined at our table, laughed at our inside jokes, trusted our family bond, began treating Marcus differently. Invitations that once came easily stopped. Conversations grew polite, distant. The warmth he had relied on, the social cushion he had taken for granted, slowly disappeared. Meanwhile, I remained present, calm, composed. I didn't tell anyone more than they needed to know. I didn't seek revenge. I simply lived my life, allowing his misdeeds to reveal themselves naturally. The first time I saw the effect was at the office. Marcus had arranged a small dinner with a client and friends, which somehow reached one of my colleagues. "Clara," she said cautiously, "I didn't know about him." I nodded, sipping my tea. "It's true." She looked at me with a mix of sympathy and astonishment. "I can't believe he—" I smiled faintly. "Believe it, and move on. That's the hardest part for some people. Seeing that life doesn't end because someone else made a terrible choice." It struck me then how fragile reputations are, how quickly someone's carefully constructed image can crumble when the truth seeps out. Marcus had built a life on subtle lies and omissions, but the world doesn't reward silence in the face of betrayal. The next test came with family. My parents had been hesitant, cautious about confronting the situation, not wanting to intrude. But when I invited them over for dinner, a casual meal, nothing special, they noticed the tension in Marcus's absence and the quiet strength in me. "Clara," my mother said gently, "we heard about Marcus." I set down my fork, nodding. "Yes, it's true." My father's face hardened slightly. "And the other woman? She's irrelevant now," I said softly. "She played a role, but she doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I can finally move forward." The relief on their faces was palpable. They had feared I would crumble, that Marcus's betrayal would break me. But in their eyes they saw that I hadn't, that I had claimed my life back with dignity and strength. Even my younger brother, who had always been brash and quick to anger, said quietly, "I'm proud of you. Most people wouldn't handle it like this." That moment, the quiet acknowledgement from family, felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. I realized that public consequences weren't just about Marcus's reputation. They were about reclaiming mine, showing the people I loved that betrayal didn't define me. The community, too, began to shift. Neighbors who had once waved cheerfully now nodded with cautious sympathy. Friends who had been friends of convenience no longer assumed my support for Marcus. Social invitations stopped, subtly, almost politely. And through it all, I stayed the same, polite, composed, unflinching. I remember one day walking down the street when I saw Marcus across the cul-de-sac, standing stiffly, trying to smile at a group of neighbors. They ignored him. Some exchanged brief glances with me, almost apologetic, almost proud. And for the first time I saw it, the weight of isolation settling on him, the social consequences of betrayal, slow but inevitable. It wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches, no viral posts, just quiet, undeniable reality. The people who mattered didn't trust him anymore. The mask he had worn for so long was gone. And the most satisfying part? I didn't need to take part in it. I didn't need to push him down. Life simply realigned itself. Truth has a way of doing that, gently, relentlessly, without theatrics. Even Marcus's attempts to reconcile fell flat. He called my phone once, 3 weeks after the incident. "Clara, please, I made a mistake. I want to talk. I want to fix this." I listened silently for a moment, then said calmly, "Marcus, there's nothing to fix. You made your choices. I made mine. And I'm not looking back." Silence on the other end. I could almost hear him swallowing, realizing that the world had already moved on, that the support he had taken for granted had evaporated. "I understand," he said finally, voice tight. And that was it. I began to notice something about myself during this period. I wasn't bitter, not in the way people expect when they've been wronged. I wasn't consumed by vengeance or resentment. I was observant, reflective, and quietly powerful. Watching Marcus's world shift, watching him face the consequences of his actions was enough. I didn't need to accelerate the punishment. Life had a way of balancing itself. The public consequences of betrayal aren't always loud. They're subtle. An invitation declined, a glance withheld, a door closed gently but firmly. And in those subtle shifts, justice quietly finds its home. I realized I had learned the ultimate lesson. Dignity, calm, and self-respect are far more potent than rage. And sometimes, the most effective action is simply living well in the aftermath. The first morning I woke up alone in my own apartment, it felt like stepping into sunlight after a long winter. Not because I was suddenly happy or because my heart was free of scars. It wasn't. The ache of betrayal lingered in my chest, a quiet throb that reminded me how deeply I had loved and how deeply I had been deceived. But for the first time in months I could breathe without fear of disruption, without a familiar shadow pressing down on me. I poured coffee into a chipped mug I had rescued from the cupboard and sat by the window. Outside, the city moved on, people rushing, cars honking, streetlights flickering. And yet, in that movement, I felt a calm pulse, a rhythm that belonged to me. I was ready to build again. Rebuilding wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a montage of new beginnings or sudden career breakthroughs. It was quiet, practical, deliberate. I began with routines, morning coffee, evening walks, folding laundry with care, instead of in a haze of sorrow. I reclaimed the small joys I had lost, reading before bed, tending to a tiny balcony garden, baking bread that filled the apartment with warmth and the smell of home. One morning, I even found myself humming as I kneaded dough, a sound I hadn't made in weeks. It was the sound of resilience. Friends became my anchor. I reconnected with those who had been steady through the years, not the ones who had whispered gossip or taken sides, but the ones who had always seen me for me. Lunches became sacred. Afternoon walks with laughter spilling over small sidewalks became therapy. Their presence reminded me that life is not solely defined by loss, but also by the people who stay. I also reconnected with myself. I started journaling, writing down memories of the past, not to dwell but to acknowledge. I wrote about the good moments, the small acts of love Marcus had shown, and also the cracks I had ignored. I didn't excuse him. I didn't forgive yet. I just documented. I wanted to understand my own story before I could step fully into a new one. Work, too, became a refuge. I returned to my office with a quiet confidence, tackling files and numbers with precision and care. For the first time, I saw my career not as something to escape into, but as something I could own. Something that reflected my capability, my intelligence, my resilience. When colleagues noticed a subtle shift in me, poise, focus, calm authority, I smiled quietly to myself. Healing wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was evident in the way I carried myself. I also began creating new boundaries. Phones and emails that had once held the weight of fear were now tools, not chains. I stopped allowing Marcus's presence, even in memory, to control my days. I declined calls, I ignored messages. I refused the temptation to check social media updates about him or the woman who had tried to take my place. Instead, I spent evenings with friends, journaling, reading, sometimes even laughing at a joke that had nothing to do with betrayal. I learned that joy doesn't need permission, it only needs space to breathe. And slowly, life rewarded me in unexpected ways. One afternoon, as I walked home from the corner cafe, I ran into an old friend I hadn't seen in years. He noticed the difference immediately. "Clara," he said, voice soft, "you look lighter, happier." I laughed quietly, shaking my head. "It's been a journey," he nodded. "I can see it. You've changed, but in a good way." I realized he was right. The betrayal had broken something, but in breaking it had also freed me. Freed me from complacency, from fear, from a life half-lived. I had learned to stand on my own, to trust myself, and to embrace a future that I controlled. Family remained my strongest support. My parents, once wary and protective, now watched me with quiet pride. My sister, always my anchor in storms, would text little affirmations. "You're incredible, Clara. Don't forget it." Even my younger brother, who initially had been skeptical, gave me a nod of respect when we met for coffee, acknowledging that I had survived and thrived. Their quiet presence, their faith in me, reminded me that life continues, even after heartbreak, and that love, real love, remains steadfast when betrayal fades. I also allowed myself forgiveness, not for Marcus, not for the woman, but for me. I forgave myself for staying too long, for hoping against hope, for giving all I had to someone who didn't deserve it. I forgave myself for the tears, the trembling, the nights I felt small and lost. And in forgiving myself, I found peace. Peace doesn't erase pain. It doesn't undo betrayal. But it reshapes the heart, makes it resilient, and opens it to new possibilities. Months passed. Life took on a gentle rhythm. I decorated the apartment in shades of soft blue and warm beige. I bought a plant that bloomed every spring, a reminder that life continues despite winters of despair. I cooked meals I loved, shared laughs with friends, and occasionally allowed myself to remember the past without flinching. One evening, as I sat on the balcony watching the sunset, I felt a sense of completion. Not perfection, not bliss, but a quiet confidence that I could handle anything life threw at me. Marcus remained a shadow in my memory, a reminder of the fragility of trust, but also a testament to my strength. I no longer feared his presence, his lies, or his choices. I had reclaimed the narrative of my life, written it with my own hand, and that was enough. Healing, I realized, isn't linear. It isn't immediate. It is messy, quiet, and often slow. But it is real, and it is powerful. I had been shattered, yes, trembling on a cold street weeks ago, unsure if I could survive the betrayal. But now, standing in the warmth of my own life, I knew I could. I had been hurt, deceived, and abandoned. But I had also learned something invaluable. Resilience isn't about avoiding pain. It's about facing it, understanding it, and emerging on the other side with dignity, grace, and a quiet, unwavering strength. I sit here now, the soft light of evening spilling across my balcony, watching the world carry on in its quiet rhythm. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the cold streets and trembling hands, they are all behind me now, and yet I carry them with me, tucked into the corners of memory, not as burdens, but as lessons. I learned that people we love can hurt us in ways we never imagined. That trust, once broken, is not always repaired. That sometimes the life we thought we had is not the life we were meant to live. But I also learned something far more important, that I am stronger than I ever gave myself credit for, that even in moments of deepest pain we have the power to rise, to reclaim our space, to live fully, even after someone else tries to take our world apart. To anyone listening to my story, I want you to hear this. Betrayal is not the end. Pain is not the final word. Life has a way of balancing itself, and our dignity, courage, and choices carry far more weight than anyone else's actions. I sit with my cup of tea now, feeling the warmth seep into my hands, and I smile softly. I have rebuilt my life, piece by piece, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. I found my voice, my strength, my peace, and so can you. So I ask you, gently, quietly, from the depth of a heart that has been broken and mended, if someone you trusted betrayed you, if your world crumbled in a single painful moment, what would you do? How would you reclaim yourself? Life will challenge you, people will disappoint you, but the most important thing is this: you are not defined by their choices, you are defined by how you rise after the fall. Thank you for listening to my story. If my journey touched you, or if you see yourself in it, I hope you'll stay, subscribe, and share your own story. Because healing, like love, grows stronger when it's shared.